you can turn around the company, you can solve your litigation problem, you can do that, or you can break up. But don't think you're going to do that all at once.
It's been described as one of the worst corporate acquisitions in history. When German company Bayer bought US seed maker Monsanto for $63 billion in 2018, it inherited billions of dollars worth of lawsuits from farmers who claimed its weed killer Roundup had caused their cancer. Today, Bayer's entire market value is less than half of what it spent to buy Monsanto. I spoke with Bayer CEO Bill Anderson about his plans to turn his company's fortunes around and how it felt to face shareholders for the first time.
You always have to separate there's where you were, there's where you are, and there's where you're going. And I feel, and I see this with our major shareholders, and I'm talking with them on a very regular basis. They own our stock, not because of where we were, and not because of where we are, but because of where they can see we're going. You know, we have these three amazing businesses. Each of them is playing a vital role in the world, for people, for patients, for farmers, for eaters. That's all of us. And we have some challenges, right? We have a high level of debt. We have the bureaucracy. Our pharma pipeline is sort of skewed toward the early stage, whereas we'd like it to be later, right? And we have this litigation situation in the US. And so we have to basically navigate driving the businesses forward, achieving this mission that we have, but at the same time, we've got to tackle those four challenges. And that's basically, our major shareholders are all on board with this. We communicated this to the capital markets already about 6 weeks ago, and they're basically saying, yeah, let's do this.
A lot of people were expecting you to break up the company, though, to maybe sell the consumer health division. You know, you've got crop science, consumer health, and pharma. You haven't ruled out doing that in the future, but why did you decide not to do it now?
Yeah. Because of the situation I mentioned with these four big challenges, it's really clear we need to put 100% of our energy into, as I said, driving the three businesses and solving the four challenges. That's a lot, okay? You know, most people try to keep it to like 3 things. We got 7. Now, if you decide you're going to break up, that actually becomes all-encompassing, all-absorbing. I've spoken to the leaders of most of the major companies who've done these breakups in the last few years. And that's basically, they told me. They said, hey, you can turn around the company, you can solve your litigation problem, you can do that, or you can break up. But don't think you're going to do that all at once, because that's basically a full employment act for everybody when you decide to do a breakup.
Let's talk about glyphosate then. That's the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup, which you acquired from Monsanto. There are obviously diverging opinions even within the medical community, but broadly speaking, regulators are on your side in the conviction that Roundup, when used correctly, does not cause cancer. I am wondering then, if you have the science on your side with this, how is it that you're spending tens of billions of dollars settling these cases?
Yeah, it's a very complex situation because we're dealing with the product liability courts in America, and you know, how would I say? It's as if the question about the safety of glyphosate is getting re-examined in 100 different courts, but not by scientific experts and not by medical experts, and so it just leads to very strange outcomes. So if you look at any assemblage of the facts, whether you look at animal studies of glyphosate or whether you look at these population-based studies, it's clear this is not a product that's causing cancer.
There are studies though that show that farmers in general are more at risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. If it's not weed killer, what else could it be? I mean, you're a scientist by background. What are the other factors? Again,
in looking at questions of causality in medicine, you need to look at the largest and most unbiased trials. And so, at some point, we have to ask, do facts matter? And if they do, we have to act on that.
talking about acting on it, you want to put an end to the system in the United States that allows these cases to be brought forward in the first place, because there is inconsistency between the federal and the state level in terms of regulation. You've been lobbying members of Congress to that end. What reaction have you got from them?
Well, we have conversations with people, with farmers, with policymakers, with the general public, and we're sort of saying, hey, we have a system in the U.S. regarding pesticides that's really broken. You know, for example, we make medicines. When we study a medicine, we have clinical trials and we have efficacy and safety results, and then we have a label from the FDA, and that label is the basis on which we sell the product in America, okay? Pesticides, that's how the system worked, except replace FDA with EPA. But a few years back, there were challenges in courts where people are saying, oh, well, based on, California Prop 65, there's a cancer warning, so the company should have warned us that there's cancer. We're saying, wait, this doesn't make any sense. We have an EPA-approved label. That is the law of the land for America. We're not at liberty to promote the product in a way that's different than what the EPA has approved. And it says not likely carcinogen, okay? We can't just decide, just like with an FDA label, we can't decide, oh, the FDA says X, but we're gonna say Y. And so this is what needs fixed. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking that legislators or the courts clarify that if a manufacturer is acting in accordance with the federally approved label, they're doing what's required. It's very simple.
And what leverage do you have when you're talking to policymakers on this? Are you saying things like, well, this is very complicated for us, it puts our business at risk in the United States. Maybe we'll sell fewer of our products there and focus our attention elsewhere. What kind of leverage do you have?
Well, I think you have to start by appealing to just basic what's right, rule of law. Do we have a system that's clear, that allows for future innovation? For example, if we can be sued when we have a product that's been deemed to be safe and effective, we can be sued for not warning it causes cancer, then how could anyone think about, say, developing the next generation of pesticides? Pesticides that could be better for the environment, better for nature, right? Well, why would you invest a decade in a novel product when you can be sued without limitation when you've done everything right?
So the hampering innovation would be your biggest argument.
Well, I think first off, do we believe in having a rule of law? I think most civilized countries think, yeah, that's a good thing, right? Two, you don't want to limit innovation. And by the way, people have to understand, weeds, fungi, insects, they evolve to become resistant to today's pesticides. And so if we want to ensure a viable food chain for tomorrow, we have to have innovation. This isn't just something to kind of make scientists happy. This is innovation that the world needs.
Glyphosate isn't the only legacy problem that you inherited from Monsanto. There's also the question of PCBs, these polychlorinated biphenyls, and cases around their historic use. They are known pollutants. How much money are you setting aside to deal with the potential consequences of that?
Yeah, this is a situation also with a long history, and there's been a lot of money invested in cleanups, and a lot of that's been completed. There are some lawsuits now, and we defend ourselves, I think, very appropriately on that, and we'll continue to do that.
When you look back on that 2018 decision, would you say Monsanto knew what it was doing?
Do you mean Bayer, Monsanto?
Monsanto by putting this acquisition. Did they see what was on the horizon?
That's not really my job to speculate about the past. We have an amazing future, and it's my job to work with the people of Bayer to make sure we achieve it.
All right, let's talk about another challenge that you're facing, and that is two drugs, two of your best-selling drugs, Xarelto, that's a blood thinner, and Eylea, an eye treatment, that are going to run out of patents in 2026. Those two drugs together earn you $7 billion a year. What are your plans for filling that gap? What have you in the pipeline?
Yeah. I'm really excited about what we have. First off, we have a high-dose Eylea that's just been approved where that patent is much longer because it's a different formulation, it's a different version, and it's really done fantastic things in terms of allowing patients to have fewer injections. And we're talking about, injections in the eye, allowing patients to maintain their vision longer without having to go into the doctor and without having to have these injections. So that's going to, I think, carry that medicine forward for a long time. We also have important medicines like Nubeqa, which is a leading treatment for prostate cancer, which is still expanding rapidly all around the globe. And then we have new products like elinzanetant. Elinzanetant is for vasomotor symptoms associated with menopause. And as you may know, hormonal therapies are not so popular because of certain side effects with hormonal therapies. And so there are literally tens of millions of women who would like to have a therapy but aren't taking anything because of the risks with hormones. And we've just had now 3 phase 3 studies that confirm the efficacy and safety of elinzanetant, and we're looking forward to bringing that for women around the world next year.
So you have a lot of promising things in the works. I do just want to ask you a more philosophical question, though, because your motto is health for all, hunger for none. We see it all over at the location here in Leverkusen. And I do wonder, because generics are undoubtedly good for consumers. They make life-saving treatments cheaper and more readily available. And yet, as a company, you are fighting in courts around the world to uphold these patents. How do you reconcile the idealism of that vision with the realities of your business? And do you think there's a better way?
Oh, we first off, we think generic medicines are fantastic. I mean, that's a great part of the system we have, okay? A lot of people don't realize just how elegant, and I would say sort of beautifully elegant, the medicine innovation system we have in the world is. Because innovator companies like ours, we make some breakthrough, curing a type of cancer or a serious chronic disease, and then we basically recoup our investment over a period of 10, 12, 14 years. And when that time's up, that medicine basically it becomes a legacy for the world for all time at a very low cost. The thing is, we need to protect that 10 or 12 or 14 years, because if we can't protect that, then we can't invest in the next medicine. We can't invest in the next breakthrough. And so I like to think about it as we're serving the world with our medicines today, but we're innovating for tomorrow. And I think that's a very reasonable trade-off.
Understood. I want to ask you about another issue that came up at your shareholders meeting, and that is your operations in South America, because there is a network of NGOs that have submitted a complaint to the OECD, and they claim that you are not upholding your corporate responsibility in South America, that you're promoting an agricultural model that is contributing to deforestation and pollution and pushing indigenous communities forcibly away from their homeland. What is your response to that?
Yeah, I'm afraid I find that very misguided. First off, deforestation mostly has to do with ranching and not growing crops, row crops like what we provide to feed the world. And if you look at a country like Brazil, in the 1970s, Brazil did not feed their own population. Today, Brazil feeds their own 200 million people, plus another 600 million in other parts of the world. Without that, you would have hundreds of millions of people in the world at risk of famine. And so we believe that a healthy row crop infrastructure is vital to people being able to live. And so it's also important that there are zones where there's no row cropping, that there's nature zones, and it's important that we protect the forests. And we're very active in promoting healthy practices, land use practices for both wildlife, for nature, for green space, and also for healthy crops for people.
But do you intervene as a company when you know these practices are not being upheld, even if it's not technically your responsibility? Do you see yourself as culpable there? For example, all the soybean cultivations in Brazil that are leading to the destruction of large areas of the savanna, which they're not allowed to do. Do you see it as your job to go in there and say, hey, don't use our insecticides and pesticides in these areas that you're supposed to be protecting?
I start with the narrative is off here, and I put feeding the world as a pretty important priority, and we need to protect and restore nature. And I think if you look at our record around the world, we're leading out on both of those things.
We talked earlier about regulations and inconsistencies, and something that people object to is the fact that there are products that are illegal in one part of the world and not in another. So one example are neonicotinoids. These are now illegal in the EU. They're insecticides that have been known to cause damage to bees and butterflies and other pollinators. They're allowed in much of the rest of the world, including Brazil. As a company, do you look for the lightest touch regulation, or is there a situation that you can conceive of where you would say our standards exceed those of a national government? Because we know that representatives are not always scientifically literate or environmentally conscious.
Sure. It's a matter of course. We have many, many standards for which products we'll sell, where we'll sell them, that far exceed local standards. And we've been, and again, I'd invite you to look at our sustainability reports, our sustainable agriculture white papers. We've published extensively on this. We absolutely think it's the job of our industry to develop better, more targeted products, safer products. We have to take that all in balance as we work to make sure that we can put food on the table for 8 billion people.
Where in the world do you think that regulation is too lax?
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure I could really pinpoint, this or that country, but these standards are rising all around the world, and we support that. We're big promoters of it.
I want to talk a little bit about geopolitics now, because you recently went on a trip with Chancellor Olaf Scholz to China. You've been doing business there for many years. What is it like to do business in China?
Well, if you spent time there, one thing you know right away is they're very innovation friendly. Okay, they've managed to raise the standard of living for the average person by, I don't know, 5-fold, 6-fold over the last 40 years, and they've done that by rapidly adopting new technologies. It's a very dynamic place. It's a very competitive place as well.
Do you think competition there takes place on a level playing field?
I would take our pharmaceutical business as an example. In medicines, I would say the level of competition is very high, and I feel like, for the most part, it's a level playing field.
What kind of conversations were you having with Chinese officials on that trip? Why were you there, basically?
Yeah, I think we think that the cooperation between China and countries like Germany has been very beneficial for both countries over time, and we'd like to continue that.
Because it can seem quite confusing from the outside that Germany is talking about de-risking, and yet foreign investment in China is at a record high. Do you feel that conflict at all as a business? Are you trying to diversify your investments outside of China as well?
I'm not sure we don't have really a situation to de-risk. We don't have a particularly large proportion of our supply chain depending on China. And so for us, we see more opportunity. For example, China has some very aggressive targets in terms of environmentally sustainable agriculture practices. And we have some great products to support that, like our seeds. And so for us, it's really more of a dialogue about, hey, how can we help you meet your food security goals and your environmental sustainability goals with our innovative products?
Now, your company, along with many, many others, suffered a lot of supply chain disruption during the pandemic and also as a result of Russia's invasion in Ukraine. You've had to find some workarounds. Tell me a little bit about what you've done.
Yeah, I think our supply chain was remarkably resilient. Okay, probably the biggest impact that we've had has been energy prices in Germany, because we still produce a fair amount of our crop protection products in Germany, and we saw energy prices sort of doubling, tripling in a very short amount of time, and so that was challenging for us from a competitive standpoint. Workarounds, it's forced us to double down on finding new sources of energy, renewable energy, forced us to Again, I would say just bend over backwards to reduce power consumption, which we're happy with that. But it is something to watch in terms of competitiveness. It's a bit of a challenge for Germany, and we certainly support efforts to ensure that we can have sustainable energy, but it's got to be affordable.
I want to go back and give you a chance to describe your dynamic shared ownership model a little bit, because we didn't get stuck into it as much as we could have. If I understand it correctly, it's about minimizing layers of management, giving people more autonomy to make decisions on lower levels, but also about cutting jobs.
Yeah, actually, probably the clearest and most accurate way to think about it is kind of simple. We hire amazing people coming from top vocational schools, from universities, scientists, engineers, lawyers, you name it, and then we put them under 10 layers of management. And by the way, when I say we, that's really industry, full stop. And the question is, wait, how do we unleash the creative potential of these tens of thousands of people in a way that is better than sticking them under 10 layers of bureaucracy and rules? But the key thing is, how do you do that without creating chaos? All right? It'd be easy to say, oh, hey, everyone just do whatever you think is right. But if you do that in an organization with 100,000 people, that'll last about a day. Okay? So what dynamic shared ownership is, it's not a concept or a culture. It is a system that says, how can we put 95% of decisions with the people doing the work without chaos? How can you do it in a coordinated way? And that's basically what the system does.
By cutting those layers of management?
No, you don't achieve it by cutting the layers of management. Think about it as you take your mission, your products, your customers, those are a given. Okay? Now, we've got tens of thousands of great people. How can we have them being able to make decisions every day? Not having like, oh, I see an opportunity. It's going to take some resources. It's going to take some investment. I've got to convince my boss, and then she's got to convince her boss, and so on. And then maybe if we convince 4 levels of managers, maybe in 6 months' time, we'll get a chance to do it. Okay? How about I have an idea. I'm going to start working on this today. How do you get to that? And the way you get to it is, yeah, you do have to take out a lot of layers, but you also have to create a new way of how do decisions like that get made? How are they coordinated rather than being coordinated up and down a hierarchy across the workers in a division, in a department? And that's basically what we're bringing.
So I can imagine that on one hand it's a very exciting time to work at Bayer because there's change underway and people are getting more autonomy, but at the same time people are scared of whether they're going to have a job next year. I mean, you've already cut the entire internal consulting team. That's a team that many perceived as home to some of the youngest and the brightest minds at the company. How are you balancing that when it comes to morale at the moment?
Yeah. This is nothing like a typical corporate restructuring. In a typical corporate restructuring, you say, we need to save 20% of costs. So you take out the org chart. The org chart's got 100 boxes on it. You cross out 20 of the 100. You announce it to everybody, and then people just have to pick up the pieces. This is a totally different deal. We're basically saying, sort of forget about the org chart. How do we make it so that every individual or small team can make the decisions about their own work? And so there are reductions, and that is unfortunate, but basically there's a lot of upside because people have a new way to work. That's exciting. And so when you look at the people at Bayer, and I see this everywhere I go, people are simultaneously, they're very excited about it and they're concerned about their jobs. But when we focus only on sort of job security, I think we're underselling people. Do you know? Work is about more than just a job. Work is where you're going to spend the majority of your life. And we want people's thing they're going to spend the majority of their life doing to be exciting. You know, we want it to be fun and challenging and not, oh, I spend my life going to meetings where we talk about which PowerPoint presentation slides we should use to try to convince our bosses to let us do the thing that we know ought to be done. So it's a very high energy activity, I would say. And everywhere I go at Bayer, I mean, people are fired up about it. The people that are doing it, now we have probably 5,000 or 6,000 people that are living in the new system. And if you talk to them, what you will hear is they're astounded, like, wow, why didn't we do this before? I mean, this is amazing. I didn't think work could be like this. And that was my experience before I came as well. I've been working with these types of models for 7 or 8 years. And there's a painful disruption at the beginning, but once you start going, nobody wants to go back. Nobody wants to go back to the old, the old hierarchy.
You mentioned that we spend the majority of our lives at work, which I think is true, but there is also life outside of work. And I'm wondering what you do to wind down. We were talking earlier that you're not allowed to skateboard anymore. Your wife won't let you because you broke your femur after 50 years on the board, I believe. And what do you do to relax?
Well, I like to read a lot, and I like to bike. I went for a nice bike ride yesterday. We had lovely sunny weather in northwest Germany. And yeah, spent a lot of time with my wife. Our kids are gone; they're off the payroll even. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, and hang out with friends.
And also, we should say that since you became CEO of Bayer, the team here, Leverkusen, has won the Bundesliga. So I'm not saying correlation and causation, but it's just a fact. Yeah.
Well, certainly it has nothing to do with any advice I've given them about how to play football. Because, I really have nothing to offer there. But I am a big fan, and I've been enjoying the games, including last Saturday. We had another, shocking sort of goal in extra time and a lot of celebrations.
Well, the world needs its fans as well. Bill Anderson, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
My pleasure, Kate.